and now he's trolling me. I'm gonna get...
If you thought you'd seen it all, think again. Because today's story doesn't just sting. It cuts straight to the legend, the legacy, and the illusion we all grew up believing. Stephen A. Smith didn't just talk about Walter Payton. He snapped publicly, loudly, and with a tone that made even longtime fans stop mid-scroll and whisper, "Bro, what did he just say?" This is Spill News, where secrets explode before your eyes. We're talking about Walter Payton, one of the greatest ever breathe, a man fans believe lived his final years in peace, surrounded by respect, legacy, and the love he earned on the field. But the truth Stephen A. hinted at, the truth insiders whispered for years, the truth reporters were too scared to publish, it's darker than anyone expected. Because behind the smiles, behind the highlight reels, behind the golden man myth the NFL polished for decades, Walter Payton was fighting battles that would break the strongest men alive. And here's my question to you. If you were in his position, same pressure, same betrayal, same loneliness, what would you do? The internet couldn't believe it, and you won't either. Let's break it all down, and trust me, it gets uglier, where secrets explode before your eyes. When Stephen A. Smith snapped on live television and brought up Walter Payton's final years, most people thought he was just doing what Stephen A. does best, stirring the pot, raising the temperature, making producers panic behind the camera, while viewers leaning closer. But the tone in his voice wasn't entertainment this time. It wasn't hype. It wasn't sports talk theatrics. It was something heavier, darker, and almost uncomfortable. The kind of tone a man uses when he's tired protecting a truth everyone else keeps hiding. And the second those words left his mouth, insiders knew exactly what door had been kicked open. Because for decades, the NFL packaged Walter Payton's final years as a graceful exit, a peaceful fade into legend, a hero retiring with dignity. But the reality? It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't pretty. And it damn sure wasn't what fans were told. To understand the storm Stephen A. stepped into, you have to understand the man behind the myth. Walter Payton wasn't just a superstar. He was a superstar, the kind of athlete who didn't just dominate games, but reshaped identities. Kids didn't pretend to be football players. They pretended to be him. Men didn't brag about stats. They bragged about surviving games against him. Coaches didn't build playbooks. They built entire eras around chasing him. He was called Sweetness, but there was nothing soft about him. The nickname wasn't about his playing style. It was about his soul. Fans saw perfection. Teammates saw greatness. Coaches saw reliability. But what nobody saw, what nobody even imagined, was the emotional weight piling up behind that smile year after year, hit after hit, expectation after expectation.
I don't think there's words to really describe what that means.
And what I truthfully like about it, he didn't forget about pain, and he wanted it to come to power and be displayed here. He didn't forget about where he came.
Stephen A. didn't mean to drop a bomb, but he did, because when he said, "Nobody wants to talk about what Walter Payton endured those last years," people froze. The producers tried to pivot. The panel tried to soften the moment. But Stephen A. refused. He kept pushing, kept hinting, kept poking the truth like a bruise that had never healed. And online, comments exploded. Bro said too much, and they got him. Why is Stephen A. shaking on air? What happened to Walter Payton? They're not telling us. The internet smelled blood, and the NFL PR machine smelled a problem. The truth is, Walter Payton's final years weren't filled with champagne ceremonies and peaceful sunsets. They were filled with silence. A deep, heavy silence that even his closest people couldn't always break. Behind closed doors, Sweetness wasn't smiling. He was fighting battles the league never acknowledged. Physical breakdowns, emotional isolation, medical confusion, and a terrifying diagnosis he kept hidden because he didn't want pity. He didn't want to be seen as weak. He didn't want to disrupt the myth the world built around him. Imagine being worshipped for your strength while secretly losing it. Imagine being praised for endurance while your body betrays you. Imagine being seen as a face of power while privately unraveling. But this wasn't just physical. Walter was dealing with emotional scars the public never saw. He felt abandoned, forgotten, used. And that's something his closest friends quietly admitted later. Walter didn't feel loved the way people said they loved him. There were nights he would sit alone for hours, ignoring phone calls, staring at nothing, trying to hold himself together. He carried everyone's expectations his whole life, but when it came time for someone to carry him, he felt alone. The most shocking part? He told people he didn't want anyone to know he was sick. Not teammates, not fans, not even some friends. He didn't want cameras showing up at hospitals. He didn't want reporters twisting his diagnosis into headlines. He didn't want people remembering him as fragile. He wanted to protect the myth more than himself. That's the kind of pressure you can't explain unless you've lived your entire life as a superhero. Stephen A.'s rant didn't appear out of thin air. Insiders later revealed he'd been in private conversations long before that episode, talking to players, coaches, and people inside the Bears organization who always hinted that the official story of Walter's final years was incomplete at best, deliberately sanitized at worst. One anonymous source told a blogger, if the world knew what he actually went through, they'd never watch NFL tributes the same way again. Another former teammate said, Walter was suffering silently while the league kept selling jerseys. The narrative of a legend fading away peacefully wasn't just wrong. It was convenient. Convenient for the league. Convenient for branding. Convenient for the image they wanted to protect. But the red flags were always there. Walter Payton was known for calling people constantly, staying connected, checking on friends, joking, laughing, staying in motion. But in those final years, that stopped. Messages went unanswered. Days passed with no contact. People he used to call every week suddenly didn't hear from him for months. A friend later said, Walter didn't disappear, he was shutting down. A psychologist reviewing the timeline even suggested his isolation wasn't just sickness, it was emotional collapse. Walter Payton didn't want people seeing him fading. He didn't want anyone to watch the decline. So he did what so many strong men do. He hid it. Stephen A. probably never intended to expose everything. But when he snapped, the internet connected dots faster than ESPN could cut to commercial. Fans started digging. Old interviews resurfaced. Former teammates posted cryptic comments. One wrote, he carried us. No one carried him. Another tweeted, we all failed him. The narrative shifted from celebration to suspicion, from tribute to tragedy. And suddenly the question wasn't, what happened to Walter Payton? It became, why didn't anyone help him? But that's just the beginning. Because the deeper you dig, the stranger the story gets. Why did certain medical records stay sealed? Why did the league push celebratory narratives while his closest allies stayed silent? Why did Walter's own comments hint at emotional pain no one addressed? And why did Stephen A., of all people, decide to crack the silence after decades of careful PR? What Stephen A. touched wasn't just a memory. It was a wound. And the moment he pulled at that thread, the entire illusion surrounding Walter Payton's final years began to unravel. But what came next, even his enemies didn't expect. What came next, even his enemies didn't expect. Because the second Stephen A. cracked that silence, something strange started happening behind the scenes. Phone calls between former teammates, urgent no-comment statements from PR reps, and one very specific message from a former Bears staffer that read, they're not ready for what's coming. Nobody explained it. Nobody clarified it. But everyone watching felt it. This wasn't just a random rant anymore. This was the beginning of a leak. A real one. The kind insiders usually bury before it reaches the surface. But this time, something slipped. It started with a resurfaced voicemail allegedly recorded in the final months of Walter Payton's life. A voicemail insiders say he left for someone who never called him back. The voice was quiet, tired, and heartbreakingly un-Walter-like. I don't know how much fight I got left, the message said. Feels like I'm carrying this alone. Fans weren't ready. They'd never heard him sound like that. Sweetness was supposed to be strong, unbreakable, eternal. But in that single recording, real or leaked deliberately, he sounded like a man worn down by the weight of silence. The kind of silence that devastates even the giants. Within hours, anonymous hospital insiders began sliding into blog with comments suggesting that Walter's condition was far more complicated, far more painful and far lonelier than the NFL ever acknowledged. One message said, he didn't just suffer physically, he suffered emotionally, and certain people in high positions ignored it. Another wrote, he deserved better support than he got. The internet erupted. Clips of Walter smiling on TV were suddenly being stitched next to these anonymous leaks. And the contrast was brutal. Fans felt betrayed, not at Walter, but at everyone who kept the truth locked away. This wasn't the only leak. A former journalist who covered the Bears anonymously posted a thread claiming there was a shadow file circulating internally for years. Interviews, notes, emotional breakdowns, private struggles. Stuff that never saw the light because it didn't fit the clean legend narrative. The NFL doesn't like messy endings, he wrote. They rewrite the story. And suddenly everyone online began asking the same question. Did they rewrite Walter Payton too? Stephen A.'s rant wasn't looking like an accident anymore. One producer claimed he'd been heated off camera all morning before the show. Another said he had a private conversation tonight before with someone deeply connected to Walter's circle. And then came the bombshell, a fake but viral DM screenshot from a former teammate saying, Walter told us not to say anything. He didn't want pity, but we should have spoken up. We failed him. True or not, the internet treated it as gospel. What made all this even darker was a leaked 2 a.m. forum post, allegedly written by a nurse who worked at the facility where Walter spent his final months. The post described long nights when Walter couldn't sleep, when he'd sit awake staring at the window, whispering that he didn't want people to see him like that. He cried some nights, the post said, not from pain, from fear. Whether the story was real or not, it spread like wildfire, and it shattered fans. In the middle of all this came another twist, a resurfaced recorded interview clip, one the NFL never aired, where Walter quietly admitted, it feels like the world forgot me the moment I stopped running. That single sentence broke the internet in half. How could someone so beloved feel forgotten? How could a legend think he didn't matter? Fans demanded answers. Reporters dug deeper. Old teammates suddenly started going quiet. And the Bears organization? Nothing but silence. An unsettling corporate, carefully calculated silence. But the most shocking leak wasn't emotional. It was medical. An anonymous med staff insider, using a throwaway account, claimed Walter's documents included notes about depression, mental exhaustion, and an emotional decline that went untreated. They alleged he wasn't just battling a physical disease. He was battling it alone. He needed support, the insider wrote. He didn't get it. True? False? Nobody knew. But the claim itself was enough to set social media on fire. And then something almost unbelievable happened. A former assistant, who had stayed close to Walter in his final years, broke their silence in a podcast. Their voice cracked as they said, Walter felt abandoned, not by fans, not by the world, by people who should have been there, people who didn't show up when it mattered. Clips from that episode went everywhere, millions of views in hours. And for the first time in decades, the world began questioning whether the NFL's greatest symbol of strength was actually a symbol of silent suffering. As if this wasn't enough, a leaked email thread from the early 2000s went viral. It showed journalists discussing a story about Walter's emotional struggles, but deciding not to publish it because it doesn't align with the legacy narrative. Another message said, his family won't like it. The league definitely won't like it. Let it go. And that single sentence, let it go, became the internet's rallying cry. Fans felt cheated. They felt misled. They felt like they'd been given a sanitized version of a man who deserved to have his full truth known. And Stephen A? Somehow, he became the face of the rebellion, without even meaning to. Clips of his rant were remixed into edits, showing Walter's highlights fading into darker imagery. One viral caption read, if Stephen A didn't speak, would anyone have? Another said, he broke the silence the league never wanted broken. But the wildest part? A final leaked voice memo, supposedly from someone extremely close to Walter, where they said he wanted people to know he wasn't perfect. He wanted people to understand his pain. He just didn't want to burden anyone. Fans cried. Comment sections turned into memorials. and meme pages that usually joked about players went dead silent for a day. It no longer felt like a sports controversy. It felt like uncovering a truth buried under decades of marketing, nostalgia, and NFL-approved storytelling. Every hour, new leaks surfaced. Stories from neighbors, friends, former players. Some real, some fake, all emotional. And with every post, the image got clearer. Walter Payton didn't just die fighting a disease. He died fighting silence. And the world never knew. But just when it felt like the truth had finally settled, another name came up. Another name came up. And that single name shifted the entire narrative from quiet tragedy to something far more complicated, far more emotional, and far more revealing. Because up until that moment, everything pointed toward Walter Payton suffering alone, carrying emotional weight in silence. But when this name surfaced, someone from deep inside his inner circle, it changed the story from a legend forgotten to a legend quietly protected. And that name was whispered across the internet like a ghost being reintroduced into a story. Everyone thought they understood. It wasn't a teammate. It wasn't a coach. It wasn't a media figure. It was someone closer, someone who saw the decline not from the outside, but from the front row, a childhood friend, one of the rare people Walter actually trusted in those final years. And according to a leaked audio clip, the most viral piece of this entire chaos, this friend claimed that Walter didn't feel abandoned by the world. He felt misunderstood by it. The clip began with a shaky voice saying, Walter didn't want the world to fix him. He wanted the world to see him. It was quiet, emotional, and completely different from everything else circulating online. The friend went on, he wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He was scared they'd change the way they looked at him. And for the first time, fans realized this wasn't just a story about suffering. It was a story about identity, about a man terrified that illness would overshadow greatness. But the internet doesn't stop at soft emotions. Once the friend spoke, investigative pages started digging deeper into Walter's private journals. Entries rumored had been shared by someone within the family circle. Whether real or fabricated, the pages painted a picture more heartbreaking than any injury report ever could. I feel like I'm disappearing, one entry read. Every day my body shrinks, but the expectations stay the same. Another said, I act strong so they don't panic. They act cheerful so I don't panic. But we're all panicking. These entries exploded online. Millions shared them with captions like, this broke me, and legends hurt too. But the most haunting journal line was this, I wish I'd given myself permission to be human. No touchdown, no trophy, no award. Nothing he ever accomplished hit fans harder than that single sentence. It made them realize how much pressure he lived under, how much weight he carried for decades, how much he performed strength even when he didn't feel it. And suddenly the story wasn't about who failed Walter. It became about who Walter was trying to protect all along. His fans, his teammates, his legacy, even his critics. But then came the twist nobody saw coming. The part of the story that flipped everything upside down. Because when deeper reports surfaced, people learned that Walter wasn't as alone as the leaks made it seem. There were people, a small, tight group, who stayed with him through the darkest nights. They just stayed silent because he asked them to. One nurse said he wanted the world to think he was still sweetness. He didn't want cameras rolling while he struggled. A teammate added, he made us promise not to tell anyone. He said, let them remember me running. And that one phrase shook everyone. The world suddenly understood. The silence wasn't abandonment. It was devotion. They weren't hiding the truth to protect themselves. They were hiding the truth to protect him. Because Walter Payton believed legends don't die in weakness. They fade in honor. And his circle respected that, even if the world now questioned it. But then something even deeper surfaced. A former Bears executive admitted in a private message that went viral. We tried to convince him to let the world in. He said no every time. He didn't want pity. He didn't want headlines. He didn't want to become a symbol of sickness. And suddenly fans weren't angry anymore. They were devastated. Because they realized Walter spent his final years trying to protect everyone else from the pain he didn't want them to feel. This shifted the conversation into the darkest chapter of all, the emotional collapse behind the scenes. A former friend said Walter struggled with fear of fading relevance. He felt the world moving on without him. He felt his body shrinking while expectations stayed giant. He felt trapped between being a hero and being a human. And that's a prison no one, not even the greatest running back of all time, could escape from. But here's the part the internet couldn't handle. Walter Payton wasn't angry at anyone. He wasn't resentful. He wasn't blaming the league, the fans, or his circle. He was blaming himself. In the leaked journals, he wrote, "I should have asked for help sooner, but I didn't know how." And that line cracked the world in half. The strongest man alive didn't know how to ask for help. The man who ran through entire defenses couldn't run from his own pain. Right when the internet thought it had reached emotional overload, one more leak detonated the entire story. A supposed final voice recording, whispering quiet, where Walter said, "Tell them I love them. Tell them I wasn't perfect. Tell them I tried." Fans flooded comment sections with crying emojis and broken hearts. Even people who weren't alive when Walter played were suddenly mourning a man they never met. And yet, in all this tragedy, something else emerged. A redemption arc Walter never lived to witness. Fans began talking, sharing, reflecting. Former players opened up about their own private battles. Analysts discussed mental health in sports with respect instead of mockery. Even young athletes who barely knew Walter's legacy began saying, "If Sweetness struggled, then it's okay if I do too." Walter's pain sparked conversations he didn't live to see. Conversations he didn't know the world was finally ready for. His vulnerability, even in secrecy, started helping people decades later. And maybe, just maybe, that's the legacy he never expected to leave behind. But as the story wrapped itself around the hearts of millions, another mystery surfaced. One final twist, one final secret, one final unanswered question that turned Walter Payton's story from tragedy into legend. Because shortly after Stephen A.'s rant, a mysterious anonymous message appeared in comment sections everywhere. No name, no photo, just one sentence. "He told me something before he died, and the world still isn't ready for it." She vanished without a trace, but the secret stayed. And if you've made it this far, take a breath. Because Walter Payton's story isn't just a sports tragedy or a controversy stirred up by Stephen A. Smith or a headline the internet twisted into chaos for a few days. It's a mirror, one that forces all of us to ask the questions we avoid until it's too late. What happens when the strongest man in the room finally breaks? What happens when a legend stops running and the silence becomes louder than the cheers? What happens when the world only loves you for what you were and never stops to ask who you are? If you were in his position, carrying pain, fear, loneliness, and the terrifying pressure to stay perfect, would you have spoken up? Would you have asked for help? Or would you have done what Walter did and protect everyone else instead? This story leaves us with more questions than answers. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the true Stephen A. Cracked Open wasn't meant to expose Walter's weakness, but to expose ours. Our fear of seeing our heroes as human. Our habit of celebrating strength, but ignoring suffering. Our obsession with perfection, even when it destroys the people we idolize. So now it's your turn. What do you think Walter Payton wanted the world to know? Was silence his shield or his prison? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because this conversation is bigger than football, bigger than controversy, bigger than anything the league ever admitted. Hit that subscribe button if you want the truth the headlines won't show you. Because on Vault Line, we're just getting started. And trust me, the next story we're about to drop, you're not ready. This is Spill News, where secrets explode before your eyes.